My colleague Ava, who had suffered a terrible accident, was working with her head down, avoiding people's eyes. Suddenly, an inappropriately loud laugh disrupted the somber atmosphere of the office. "Look at that battered face. You're like a monster. Monsters shouldn't come to the office. Haha." The unreserved loud voice of our boss, Kevin, struck her heart like a sharp arrow. Ava, who had been holding on until the last moment, finally couldn't hold back and started to shake her shoulders slightly. The moment I saw a tear drop from her face, which she covered with her hands, my head heated up in anger. I'm fed up with losing the smiles of those I care about. With that thought, I began to plan a meeting with a certain person. My name is Tyler. I'm a 35-year-old ordinary office worker. My family runs a hospital, and I was given everything I needed since I was young. My parents allowed me to freely pursue any hobbies or interests I had, and provided a good environment for my education. However, I had no outstanding talents and realized by the time I entered elementary school that I had no particular skills. In contrast to me, my younger brother, 2 years my junior, Kyle, quickly achieved notable results. Kyle, with intelligence much like our father's, continued to deliver results one after the other, quickly becoming the focus of our father's expectations. But I didn't resent that. Instead, I was thankful that I could live freely without any constraints. However, this relationship crumbled fragilely during middle school. While I aimlessly attended a local middle school, Kyle was accepted into a prestigious middle school in New York. Seeing Kyle aiming for medical school to follow in our father's footsteps, I started to feel a sense of alienation. My father also seemed to pay attention only to Kyle, as if I didn't exist. Having lost all confidence, I became unable to attend school and started to shut myself in my room. The one who continued to love me unchanged was my mother. "You have your own strengths. Don't worry. There are so many fun things in the world. You don't have to rush." My mother was an optimist and always reassured me that it's okay. Hearing her words somehow eased my anxiety, and I felt that I had value as I was. Thanks to her, I managed to graduate from middle school and went on to a local high school. I had been playing games as a hobby, and on a whim, I decided to create my own game, which was unexpectedly well received when I presented it at the school festival. Seeing me interact with classmates through my game, my mother was very pleased. "I'm glad you found something you're passionate about." I still clearly remember her smiling face when she said that. It was soon after that when my mother was diagnosed with a serious illness. The once cheerful mother grew thinner and lost her energy day by day. The treatment started, but it was only enough to slow the progression of the illness, not cure it. The medication made her lose a lot of weight, and she lost her hair. Eventually, she couldn't live at home anymore and spent her days lying in her hospital bed. Just before she passed away, she muttered with a sad face, "Why me? I still want to live." The sight of my grieving mother was so painful that I wanted to look away, and it's deeply etched in my memory. Afterward, I became a working adult and joined a newly established game company. Determined not to disappoint my mother in heaven, I dedicated myself to work every day. "Good morning. You're looking down again. Cheer up." The one who greeted me energetically was my colleague Ava. She was cheerful and friendly to everyone, brightening the atmosphere at work. Not only was her mood uplifting, but she was also highly skilled, having contributed to several hit projects as a programmer. Talented, action-oriented, and beautiful, Ava was indeed a perfect woman. She never got carried away by her abilities and always approached her work with seriousness, which I deeply respected. Ava, with her eyes sparkling, approached me just as I arrived at work. "Hey, I heard we're getting a new department head. I wonder what kind of person they'll be." "Ah, that's right, starting today." The new department head, an elite graduate from a prestigious university, was specially recruited from another company by our upper management. We were initially hopeful about the new department head's arrival, but within a month, we were fed up. The department head, named Kevin, was in his prime working years in his 40s. However, he seemed quite confident in himself and never tried to hide his attitude that he was superior in any situation. "I'm the reason this company's performance improved. Stop complaining and just follow the orders." With an annoyingly loud voice and a pompous attitude, he ordered his subordinates around. Because of Kevin's habit of asserting his superiority at every opportunity, the previously relaxed atmosphere of our workplace gradually became tense and uncomfortable. Kevin, without considering the situation on the ground, kept bringing in more work. As a result, the employees were forced to work tirelessly, ending up with daily overtime. Despite this, since the numbers showed an increase in the department's sales, the upper management praised Kevin. This led to a vicious cycle where Kevin's attitude became even more arrogant, and his unreasonable demands on his subordinates continued unabated. It would have been tolerable if he was competent, but when Kevin came along with me to meet a client, insisting on his superiority even there, it ended terribly. During the final discussions with the client, Kevin interjected, "What? You can't even handle this level of work and outsource it to us?" Kevin, as usual, looked down on the client with his condescending attitude. The moment my face turned pale and the client became furious, announcing the deal was off, happened simultaneously. Years of trust I had built with the client were destroyed by a single comment from Kevin. "How could you do this? This client was supposed to work with us for the next 10 years. I protested to Kevin when we got back, but he nonchalantly retorted, "What's the point of any plan if it doesn't make money? It's a waste of time talking to such a small client." Kevin seemed completely unconcerned about the broken deal being his fault. "The company's profit comes first. This is the problem with you. I've been working hard to earn that client's trust. You've made all that effort go to waste because of your actions, Kevin." Kevin glared at me menacingly as I protested impulsively. "If you're going against me, you better be prepared. I can always complain about your work attitude to the upper management." Kevin's veiled threat of punishment made me bite my lip and fall silent. After my mother's death, my performance at the company was all that supported me, having never been recognized by anyone else. Yet, the frustration only grew, having to work under such an irresponsible boss. I wanted nothing to do with him anymore, but the pain of having to see his face every day at work was unbearable. Since then, I've been careful to avoid working with Kevin as much as possible. But he kept causing trouble for other subordinates as well. He wouldn't bother to learn document preparation or administrative procedures, saying such simple tasks should be done by subordinates, and dumped everything on us. At times, he would even take documents without asking, including taking documents containing sensitive personal information to another company. It nearly turned into a major crisis, but Ava, who was with him at the time, apologized profusely. Thanks to her, this situation didn't escalate, and it was resolved within our department. But it could have easily become an emergency that threatened the company's existence. Yet, Kevin continued his defiant attitude without admitting any fault. Preparing easy-to-understand materials for the supervisor is the subordinate's job. It was almost a big crisis because of your lack of attentiveness. Ava was the first to lose patience with Kevin's unapologetic behavior. On the day of the personal information incident, Ava invited me out for drinks. She, too, had been troubled by Kevin's terrible attitude on a regular basis. "It's not just today. I went to a meeting with him before, and he started lecturing the client arrogantly, causing a lot of trouble. I thought so. It's bad enough with people inside the company, but causing trouble for our clients is too much." So, Ava and I ended up venting to each other, but there was nothing we could do about it. I was just hoping Kevin would be transferred out as soon as possible, but Ava had other plans. From the next day, Ava began to firmly say no to Kevin. That day, as Kevin was criticizing the work of his subordinates as usual without providing any concrete suggestions for improvement, Ava spoke up. "If you're so confident, please proceed with the work without relying on us. We, in turn, will not involve Kevin at all." Her statement echoed the sentiments of the entire workplace. Her argument was so convincing that Kevin couldn't refute it, no matter how much he tried afterward. Seeing this, spontaneous applause broke out from the employees in the department. Everyone was fed up with Kevin's tyranny. Completely isolated, Kevin glared at us in silence, his face flushed with anger. While everyone was expressing their gratitude to Ava, Kevin shot her a furious look. After being humiliated in front of everyone, Kevin began to harbor a grudge against Ava from that day on. "You will see. You've made a fool of me like this. I'll get back at you someday." Muttering complaints, Kevin returned to his desk. Following that day, Kevin became subdued, allowing the employees to carry out their daily work smoothly. Everyone was thankful to Ava for speaking up so clearly. Especially Henry, the manager caught between Kevin and his subordinates, was so moved that he tearfully thanked Ava. We all hoped for a return to a peaceful workplace. But then, shocking news was brought to the workplace. Ava had been involved in a serious accident. She was out on a visit with Kevin by car when they unfortunately got into an accident. Ava was unconscious when taken to the hospital and had to be admitted. Kevin, on the other hand, had no serious injuries and showed up to work the next day as if nothing had happened. It was all because of her poor driving that I had such a terrible experience. She should work on her driving skills before meddling in other people's work. Ava is seriously injured and hospitalized. Isn't it cruel to speak like that? I couldn't help but retort to his sharp words. But Kevin just smirked with a chilling smile. A sudden feeling of unease washed over me. "Anyway, when Ava comes back, please don't say anything that could upset her. All right, we'll see if she can come back here after she's discharged." His ambiguous statement made me frown. Kevin left with a creepy smile, saying no more. The reason for Kevin's behavior became clear 2 months later when Ava was discharged from the hospital. Her condition upon returning to work was dire. "Ava, I'm sorry for showing you something so unsightly, with these scars remaining." Speaking in a low voice, Ava then headed to her desk, her head bowed. The sight of her, so different from the bright and smiling person who used to greet me, made me feel melancholy. Her face was still healing, covered in bandages, with more than half concealed. The visible skin was discolored from the injuries, and her muscles were contorted, distorting her mouth. Her once smooth and beautifully shaped face, like a boiled egg, was now unrecognizably distorted. I couldn't find the words to comfort Ava, who quietly kept her head down. Although I knew about the serious accident, I wasn't aware of the extent of the injuries to her face. Ava worked with her head down, making sure no one could see her face. Sensing the situation, the colleagues remained silent, not attempting to start a conversation. But the somber office atmosphere was suddenly shattered by Kevin's inappropriate laughter. "With a face like that, all bumpy, you look like a monster. Monsters shouldn't come to the office." Kevin's loud and insensitive remark made everyone stiffen. Naturally, Ava heard it too, and his words shattered her heart like a sharp arrow. Ava, who had been holding back until the last moment, started to shake her shoulders finally, unable to contain her emotions any longer. The moment I saw a tear drop from her face, which she covered with her hands, my head heated up with anger. Having worked with her for many years, I had never seen the always smiling Ava cry. Her saddened appearance overlapped with the image of my mother before she passed away. My mother also had a disfigured face and cried every day. I was fed up with losing the smiles of loved ones. When I noticed her tears, such feelings stormed through my mind. I immediately stood up, shielding Ava from behind. Then, I raised my voice in anger at Kevin, who was still laughing thoughtlessly. Kevin, that's way out of line. As a supervisor, no, as a person, this is unacceptable. Apologize right now. What? I haven't done anything that needs apologizing for. Are you accusing me of something too? If you don't like having me as your supervisor, work somewhere else. Saying this, Kevin left the room while making a call somewhere. I considered going after him but realized I had more important things to attend to. Turning back, I saw Eva quietly shedding tears, her head bowed in sadness. I couldn't let her be saddened like my mother was. Taking her hand firmly in mine, I spoke with sincerity. Don't worry about a thing. I'll always be here for you, so there's no need to worry. Just as my mother used to encourage me, I spoke gently and gave her a reassuring smile. Working together at this company, Ava always greeted me with a radiant smile. Now was the time to return the favor, I thought, as I gently patted her back with encouragement. Soon after, I was called in by the upper management. I was subjected to a stern questioning. It was about the incident where Kevin took documents containing personal information to another company. Somehow, the story had been twisted to suggest that it was not Kevin but I who had made the mistake, and the management was grilling me. I had no recollection of such an event and desperately tried to explain, but no one would listen. Before I knew it, my transfer to a rural area was decided. All this happened just a few hours after my confrontation with Kevin. It was too well executed to be coincidental, and later, an unbelievable truth came to light. Kevin had apparently been doing this kind of thing repeatedly in the past. Whenever he made a mistake, he would take his time to set up a subordinate to take the fall. He would fabricate all the evidence and then suddenly pin the blame on a subordinate, rushing the upper management's decision to transfer or fire them before they could respond. This way, the blame for the mistake fell on an unsuspecting employee. Kevin planned to continue acting as a supervisor in the workplace, escaping any blame. The thought of being transferred because of someone else's mistake was unbearable. As I was fuming over what to do, I was called in by Nathan, who used to be my supervisor. Even if it was Kevin's suggestion, it's impossible for Tyler to do such a thing, but Kevin won't be satisfied with this situation as it is. Nathan said, "It's frustrating, but we're currently devising a plan against Kevin. I'm sorry, but could you pretend to be transferred for a while?" Nathan then suggested I take some paid leave. Having focused on work all this time, I had about 3 weeks of vacation accumulated. Since Ava's accident, I had been working non-stop to fill the gap left by such a capable employee. Encouraged by Nathan's words to think of it as an extended break, I accepted the proposal. As I was about to leave the company, Nathan quietly informed me of something else. He mentioned contacting a certain individual. It was Harrison, the chairman of the group of companies overseeing ours. Chairman Harrison was often traveling around the world and rarely had the chance to return to America. But he was scheduled to come back to America soon, and Nathan would reach out to him on my behalf. Grateful for Nathan's arrangements, I decided to wait for the day I would meet Chairman Harrison. The first person I contacted that day was Kyle. Now a respectable doctor and having taken over our father's hospital, I had great respect for Kyle. But it had been a while since we last spoke on the phone, so I was nervous as I listened to the ringing tone. "Tyler, it's rare for you to call me." Hearing the familiar voice that hadn't changed over the years, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. I pleaded with Kyle for help, sharing with him Ava's situation. I told him about the injuries she sustained in the accident and my desire to heal the scars on her face as much as possible. After pondering for a while, Kyle promised to do everything within his power to help. "I'd like to see her condition myself. It might be busy, but can you come to our hospital?" I told Kyle we'd come right away, and hung up. Ironically, thanks to Kevin, I had 3 weeks of paid leave and was ready to move at any time. I immediately contacted Ava and rushed to Kyle's hospital. "I appreciate the thought, but are you sure they can treat me? The doctor I saw said it would be difficult without a highly skilled physician." Ava looked at me with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Besides, they said the good doctors are so popular that I couldn't get an appointment for the next 2 years." "No problem, I'm sure it will be fine." The doctor she mentioned was probably Kyle. Kyle is a skilled plastic surgeon who has treated thousands of cases of scars, burns, and injuries. As the scars and indentations are carefully treated, the patient's expressions brighten. Kyle once said that seeing their smiles is the greatest reward of all. Supporting a worried Ava, we hurried to the hospital where Kyle was waiting. In the consultation room, Kyle carefully examined Ava's facial injuries and nodded confidently. "It's okay, there's no damage to the bones, and the damaged nerves around the mouth can be carefully repaired with surgical suturing. Let's schedule you for surgery." Encouraged by his confident words, Ava looked up in surprise. Straightening her back with the vivacity she had before the injury, she finally showed a smile. Once the hospital stay and surgery were scheduled, we discussed the plans on our taxi ride home. I thought I'd have to live with this face forever, but the thought of being able to return to how I was before makes me so happy. Seeing Ava's spirits lifted, I too felt relieved. Thanks to Kyle, she was able to look forward again. "I'll definitely get back at Kevin once I'm healed. I won't forgive him." I thought her anger was due to his comments at the office, but as she elaborated, I was horrified. It wasn't just what he said that was awful, but the cause of the accident. He was road raging. He braked suddenly and swerved lanes just because he didn't like the car behind us. Ava began to recount the situation at the time of the accident, still seething with anger. Although Kevin claimed Ava was driving that day, it turned out he insisted on driving himself. But his driving skills were poor, and Ava, sitting in the passenger seat, was nervous. At one point, Kevin sneezed and accidentally hit the brakes. The sudden braking during the drive led to the car behind them honking lightly. However, Kevin, mistaking it for provocation, became furious. He started braking abruptly and swerving to obstruct the lane change of the car behind, thinking of retaliating. Ava tried to calm Kevin down and offered to drive instead, but his pride wouldn't allow him to stop his reckless driving, saying he was just teaching a rude person a lesson. As a result, distracted by the car behind, Kevin caused an accident but covered up the fact that he was driving during the investigation. Just as he always did at work, he pinned the blame on his subordinate Ava. Upon hearing that, I acted quickly. I checked the dashcam footage from the company car involved in the accident to find the relevant footage. With all preparations complete, I awaited the day of reckoning, feeling relieved. Meanwhile, with Ava and me absent from the company, Kevin was visibly in a better mood. "If you defy me, you'll end up like Tyler and Ava, unable to stay in the company," he threatened, harassing any employee he disliked. As reports of his behavior reached me, my 3-week paid leave came to an end, and it was time to return to work. Executive Nathan called me in and asked me to wait in a room at the company. Chairman Harrison, who had just returned from an overseas inspection, was visiting the company, causing a stir since the morning. Kevin, on the other hand, was eager to meet Chairman Harrison and promote himself, pacing near the office. When Chairman Harrison arrived, he began chatting with Nathan. Kevin, having no business there, hovered nearby, desperate for attention. After about 10 minutes of conversation, Chairman Harrison turned to Kevin with a surprised expression as if he had just noticed him. "Ah, so you're the famous Kevin I've heard about. an elite graduate from a prestigious university, I hear. I've been told your department has seen a significant improvement in performance. Thank you very much. Even Kevin, as self-centered as he is, seemed unable to behave recklessly in front of the chairman of the group company. If an employee as capable as you can get along well with that person, I'm sure you'll achieve great results together. After all, that person is one of the most promising talents in our company. That person? Who might that be? Ignoring a puzzled Kevin, Chairman Harrison intentionally looked around with an exaggerated gaze. Then, his expression grew stern as he pressed on. It seems my grandchild is nowhere to be seen here. Your grandchild works at this company. Kevin, not knowing who he was referring to, started to sweat and panic. Chairman Harrison lowered his voice and interrogated him. I hope no one has driven my grandchild out of the company. At the menacing tone of his voice, Kevin was trembling and sweating profusely. That's when I, who had been waiting in the next room, made my appearance. Tyler. Ignoring Kevin, who was staring at me in shock, I turned to Nathan. Thank you for the 3-week break. It was very refreshing. I'm glad you could rest. Keep up the hard work. At that point, Kevin seemed to realize something as he stared intently at me. Then Chairman Harrison approached me, starting a cheerful conversation. I thought you might have been transferred out since you were gone. As if I could be transferred from a subsidiary company owned by my grandfather. Saying that, I slowly turned to look at Kevin. He must have been quite taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was moving silently. In fact, this group company founded by my grandfather, from the hospital where my father and Kyle worked to the management of my game company, operates in a wide range of fields. However, I had joined this company without using my family's connections, so only the president and Nathan knew this fact. After a while, Kevin coughed a few times and then started talking to me in a strangely familiar tone, as if hearing this for the first time. I always thought Tyler was an exceptional employee, truly worthy of being Chairman Harrison's grandson. Enough with the lies. I've heard all about you from my grandson. At Chairman Harrison's words, Kevin visibly jumped. Staring at me as if in disbelief, I gave him a reassuring smile. Kevin began to tremble as Chairman Harrison continued in a voice barely containing his anger. I've received a detailed report from my grandson about your usual work attitude. Harassing my grandson, treating other employees terribly. I cannot forgive any of it. Chairman Harrison's decisive words left Kevin opening and closing his mouth in a futile attempt at excuses. But no sound came out as he faced the chairman's intense gaze. Moreover, you caused an accident and then fled, pushing the blame onto a subordinate. Leave this company immediately. At the loudness of Chairman Harrison's voice, Kevin must have realized that everything was exposed. Unable to make his usual excuses, he let out a pitiful cry and staggered out of the company. Afterwards, the company submitted the dashcam footage to the police. In fact, our company's dashcams were the type that recorded not only the front and rear of the vehicle, but also the interior. The footage clearly showed Kevin's reckless driving at the time of the accident. This became irrefutable evidence, revealing that Kevin was indeed driving. Kevin, having caused the accident, had the paramedics take Ava away first. Then he falsely reported to the police that the severely injured Ava was the one driving. Normally, such a thing would be difficult to cover up, but it turns out Kevin's uncle holds a significant position within the police force and tried to sweep it under the rug. Apparently, his uncle also found it inconvenient to have a relative involved in a scandal, and Kevin had been let off for minor offenses like parking violations in the past. He must have thought he could hide this accident as well. Kevin's cowardice in engaging in reckless driving and then trying to pin the blame on Ava outraged the employees anew. Ava, unaware of these details, was quite shocked to learn the truth. Ava, preoccupied with her facial scars, never dreamed she would be made responsible for the accident. It was all a part of Kevin's despicable scheme to evade responsibility. As a result, Kevin was arrested by the police. With evidence against him and his attempt at malicious evidence tampering, he was expected to face severe punishment. The last time I saw him, Kevin had lost the confidence he once had and looked gaunt and pale, a shadow of his former self. I hope he spends the rest of his life facing up to the crimes he committed and doing his best to make amends. Afterwards, I visited Ava post-surgery to support her through her recovery. Though she may not have returned completely to her former self, she now smiles at me without hiding her face. Her bright expression was just like the Ava I knew before. I've never been more grateful to have a skilled plastic surgeon as a brother. Furthermore, Ava's surgery led me to reconnect with my family, from whom I had been estranged. To my surprise, my father and Kyle had purchased the games I was involved in. "Your games are really interesting," Kyle said, the skilled plastic surgeon engrossed in my creation, which brought a laugh to my lips. Feeling previously alienated, I now realized my family had always been waiting for me, despite my avoidance. This connection was all thanks to Ava. Now, Ava's beauty has fully returned to her face. "Tyler, you're my savior. Thank you so much. I just did what anyone would do. It was Kyle who healed you." Faced with Ava's direct gaze, I felt embarrassed. "That's not true. You were the one who reached out to me when I was hurt and crying." Ava's smiling face warmed my heart. This time, I was able to protect the smile of someone important to me. "Thank you," she said, extending her hand, which I gladly took. As we looked into each other's eyes, we both smiled, our cheeks relaxing in unison. "I'm going to let go of the employee who didn't finish high school and bring in a talented college graduate, haha. I was unfairly accused of a mistake I didn't make and was informed I would be let go. Despite having dropped out of high school and contributed to the company for nearly a decade. The person my boss, now replaced by David, wants to put in my place is a favored newcomer who graduated from the same university as David and joined the company last year. David was quite disliked by the employees from the start due to his arrogant attitude, as he was hired as a manager through nepotism, being the brother-in-law of President Fopson. The new hire from the same university probably seemed endearing to him, being one of the few who didn't know enough to keep their distance. But it's unreasonable to think of making him a manager in his second year. Just as I was about to express this, "Would the underqualified dropout please expedite his departure?" David mocked me. Seeing a junior employee smirking behind the tunning David, I sighed deeply and accepted my termination with a "understood." I was grateful to President Fopson and didn't hate my job, but what happens next is no longer my concern. Let David and his favorite deal with the consequences. My name is Nathan. I resided with my parents and a younger brother, 3 years my junior, until our parents divorced when I was in the 3rd grade. I remember how my brother, who was very close to me, cried when it was decided that I would live with our mother and he with our father. My mother didn't want to split us up, saying we were close. But my father strongly objected. Even if my father took both of us, it would be difficult for my mother, who had been a stay-at-home mother, to pay child support for both. And if my mother took both of us and received child support from my father, it would still be a tight life for the 3 of us. It was clear that as we grew older, the cost of food would increase. I didn't want to be separated from my brother either, but I was left speechless when my father asked if I was okay with my brother living hungry. My father argued that it was best for each parent to take one child without child support, claiming it was a mercy for him to take my brother, who had 3 more years of care. Despite my mother's resistance to separate us, she couldn't convince my father. So, at the end of my 3rd grade year, I ended up living with just my mother. My mother, who had been a stay-at-home mother, was worried about finding a job, but she got hired by a home service company within 2 weeks. While she laughed that her housewife experience came in handy, I occasionally caught her in a state of melancholy. She probably worried about my brother. Despite my requests to see my brother, my father always found excuses not to let us meet. Too busy with the new school. Tired from daily lessons. No time due to after-school club activities. The reasons varied, but my mother and I never got to see my brother. By the time I entered middle school, my mother seemed less depressed about not seeing my brother. She's perhaps having adjusted to our life together or resigning to the fact that my father wouldn't allow it. We managed a stable life. My mother's job was stable and my grades were good. Thanks to her advice to focus on my studies to broaden my future job options. Life is mostly spent working, not studying. The choice of job can significantly affect one's life quality. Hence, it's wise to work hard in school to increase job options. That was my mother's belief. Though she had been a stay-at-home mother, she was actually a graduate of a prestigious university and had worked for a major company. It seems she resigned from her job at my father's request when they got married, but she regrets that decision now. Being a significant corporation, they offered comprehensive benefits, and numerous parents opted for reduced working hours to accommodate child care needs. She met my father while he worked at a branch of that company. Looking back, he probably wanted me to stay home because he didn't like me working at a bigger company than his. I agreed with her words. The father I was acquainted with consistently exhibited a sense of superiority. He looked down on my mother with just a stay-at-home mother whenever he was displeased. If my mom hadn't retired, there's no way anyone at the headquarters where she worked could have spoken to her like that. Hearing that story really drove home the importance of choosing the right workplace. If my father worked at the parent company and my mother at a branch, I'm sure he would have looked down on her, even though she was working too. Given how my father is, he probably behaves terribly towards anyone he considers beneath him, even outside of work. I decided I didn't want to be demeaned by people like my father in my career. Thinking about my future, I enrolled in a technical high school strong in aita. The high school I attended ranked around 30th nationwide, indicating it had a fair share of bright students. Perhaps because of that, there wasn't a small number of female students, and I even got a girlfriend for the first time in high school. I thought I was having a smooth-sailing high school life, but then, just after I advanced to my sophomore year, my mother suffered a heart attack. That day was so cold that it snowed, even though it was April. I contacted my father for the first time in years. I wanted to ask for financial support. I didn't expect my father, who hadn't even sent me a word for birthdays or congratulated me on my entrance or graduation, to help. But he's still my father, after all. We agreed on no child support, didn't we? You'll have to manage on your own. Though it was a faint hope, my father flatly refused me. I quickly started a part-time job. It was at a diner run by an elderly couple nearby. Knowing my situation, the elderly couple took quite a liking to me. The meals they provided were lavish, and they were generous with my wages too. Thanks to them, I was able to continue living as before, but one day they said, "We've decided to close the diner, sorry." They decided to close due to physical limitations. I later heard from a regular customer that the business was barely making it. Despite that, they provided lavish meals for me, an outsider, and were generous with my pay, which made me feel guilty. The next part-time job I decided on was at a convenience store, but due to a staff shortage, I ended up working long hours. From 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., after school, and from early morning at 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., right before going to school. I ended up spending 9 hours a day on part-time work, regardless of weekdays or weekends. I was supposed to work only 5 hours from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., but I agreed to help out for a while because they were short-staffed. However, this became the norm, and there was no improvement even after more than 2 months. With almost no free time left, I was dumped by my girlfriend and began to neglect my studies. After a while, I ran into the elderly couple who owned the diner where I first worked. They happened to come to the convenience store with their grandchild. The elderly couple was surprised to see me. I had lost a lot of weight. The elderly couple, concerned for me, invited me to come to the diner on my days off. Even though the diner had closed, it was also their home, so the couple continued to live there. When I visited them as promised, after school on a weekday off from my part-time job, the couple prepared a lavish meal just like they used to when I worked for them. And then I was informed that I was being made to work illegally. 15 to 18-year-olds can only work 8 hours a day, up to 40 hours a week, according to the law. I was working 9 hours a day, without breaks, and 54 hours a week with a 6-day work schedule. You'll ruin your health working like that. The couple was worried, but I told them I was thinking of dropping out of school. Since starting the convenience store part-time job, I couldn't keep up with my studies, and being in the same class as my ex-girlfriend was tough. In hindsight, I should have quit the convenience store job and looked for another one, but at the time, I wasn't capable of rational thought. I was preoccupied with thoughts of dropping out. The elderly couple apologized, thinking the closure of their diner was to blame, but they weren't at fault. Not at all. Your kindness was a great help to me. I'm truly grateful. When I expressed my gratitude, the elderly couple offered to introduce me to a company run by their son. If you're going to work after leaving school, it might be better to be a full-time employee rather than a part-timer. With that, they introduced me to the father of the grandchild they had brought to the convenience store the other day. This company was a metalworking firm, taken over by the elderly couple's son from his uncle to become the president. My studies in school were primarily in IT, so I knew nothing about metalworking. However, they were willing to hire me as long as I was motivated. I ended up dropping out of high school to work there as a full-time employee, but it was quite challenging since everything was new to me. Whenever it got tough, I would talk to Alex, a former high school classmate. Alex was studying metalworking in the mechanical department, so he was able to give me advice. Even after I left high school, he kept in touch and was a significant support who always worried about me. As Alex was about to enter his 3rd year of high school summer vacation, he made a proposal to me. He suggested doing something big using the information engineering I had studied and the mechanical technology he was learning. I was surprised by such an unexpected suggestion. Wouldn't it be difficult to find a time while working? Alex didn't expect me to freeze in shock. He was concerned about time. I know he's concerned about my time because he's aware of the tough times I went through with my convenience store part-time job during high school. I decided to accept his proposal, hoping to make it a memorable summer vacation for Alex, who was always so considerate. I started spending my time after work and on weekend with Alex. Though it was Alex's idea to do something big, he didn't have a specific plan, so we had to start from scratch. After many sleepless nights, the parts we created were patented. "We'll be rich if this hits big, haha," we joked around. Getting carried away, we had acquired a total of 3 patents by the time Alex was about to graduate from college. Alex had established a company to develop parts with patents while he was still in college. I was invited to join the management, but I declined out of gratitude to President Thompson, who had hired me after dropping out of high school. Instead, I agreed to help as an advisor. Around this time, I was transferred from factory work to an office position at the headquarters. Shortly thereafter, President Thompson's brother-in-law joined the company as a department head. This department head was the brother-in-law of President Thompson's wife. Whether it was due to his rapid appointment or his inherent nature, he behaved arrogantly and was disliked by the employees. The following year, President Thompson's daughter, Sarah, joined the company. Sarah, being President Thompson's daughter, never flaunted her status and was earnest about her work. This was in stark contrast to David, who acted arrogantly because of his family ties. David believed he would be the heir since President Thompson had only a daughter. However, with Sarah's entry, all the employees started to see her as the successor. Displeased with this, David began to take his frustrations out on me. David seemed to have always resented me for being a high school dropout with only a junior high school diploma. I had been subjected to unreasonable overtime and work dumping, but recently, the direct insults had started. It seems that President Thompson isn't fond of David, as he hardly ever speaks to him at the office. Even when David initiated conversation, it was quickly ended. David is a college graduate and a family member. Despite holding a managerial position, he is not taken seriously. In contrast, President Thompson, who had hired me personally, took an interest in me and often initiated conversation. That probably made David dislike me even more. The following year, I had a fateful reunion. To my surprise, my brother Michael, who had been taken away by our father and with whom I had lost contact, joined the company. Michael, who had grown into a fine young man since graduating from college and joining the company, still had traces of the child I remembered. However, Michael was somehow considered an only child. Wondering if perhaps Michael didn't remember me, I decided to pretend to be a stranger. While it was a bit lonely not being able to talk as brothers, I thought there was no need to disturb his peace if he had indeed forgotten. Michael, a graduate of the same university as David, was particularly favored by him. He was often invited out for drinks and seemed to be trusted with significant projects. However, Michael didn't seem to be very capable at his job, often making mistakes. Some of the work David dumped on me included tasks assigned to Michael, which I inadvertently discovered. I silently corrected and submitted the work, but that was a mistake. Michael, unaware of his mistakes, continued submitting documents without realizing. David, looking down on me, started to think it was okay to blame his mistakes on me. While it was still manageable when the errors were caught internally, Michael eventually made a mistake in a major project that inconvenienced our clients. Thinking he could pin the blame on me, whom David looked down upon, Michael claimed the work was mine. I wasn't even informed about the tasks Michael was handling. Blaming me for the mistake was absurd. Yet, David, fearing he would be held responsible, mockingly said, "I'll fire the bottom-dwelling junior high grad and replace him with a superior college grad. Haha." I had been promoted to manager in an unusual move. Though the department only consisted of Sarah and myself, it would be unreasonable to make Michael, who was only in his second year, a manager. When I was about to say so, "Could the incapable junior high grad please quit already? Haha." David mocked me. I realized the endearing Michael I once knew was gone. Seeing Michael smirking behind David, who was making snide remarks, I sighed deeply and accepted my dismissal with a "understood." Sarah tried to intervene, but David wouldn't listen. "Are you going to use your father's power against me?" Sarah disliked being viewed through the lens of being President Thompson's daughter. She always cared about not dishonoring her respected father. Probably thinking Sarah would stay silent if accused of using her father's power, David continued. But Sarah didn't stay silent. She explained that firing me now would cause more trouble for the company, making it a matter beyond using power. Still, David ignored her words and ordered me to leave immediately. I was grateful to President Thompson and didn't dislike my job, but what happened next was no longer my concern. Let David and his accomplice bear the responsibility. A month later, I was employed at Alex's company. After being dismissed, I immediately contacted Alex and started working for him. It was a small company with only 10 employees, but its annual sales exceeded $5 million. Most of that was from patent profits. In addition to the patents Alex and I obtained, the company had acquired dozens more. Alex's company developed parts and sold the patent technology. During a meeting to plan the next part development, I received a call from Michael. Of course, I didn't answer during the meeting, but the calls kept coming. "Who's calling? Isn't it an emergency?" Alex asked with concern, but after I informed him it was a junior from my previous company, I turned off my phone. After the meeting, I turned on my phone and found a message. "Big bro, my bad. Please answer the phone." It was written like that. Michael recognized me as his brother. Yet, he had set himself up as an only child and looked down on me, which infuriated me. The reason Michael, who was once so honest and kind, had come to look down on others could only be attributed to our father's upbringing. After divorcing our mother and taking Michael with him, it seems my father quickly remarried another woman. Essentially, he had been having an affair. This woman, a career-oriented individual who didn't want children, was apparently willing to raise Michael since he was still young. That's why my father was adamant about taking only Michael. The new woman in his life, who became Michael's stepmother, spoiled him rotten. Anything he wanted was bought for him, and she allowed him to do whatever he wished. Michael came to prefer his indulgent stepmother over our mother, who would scold him for wrongdoing and taught him to even refrain from sweets. Consequently, he began refusing visits with me and our mother. The message detailed these circumstances, but ultimately, it seemed to justify his behavior rather than show any real remorse. As I read the message, another call came in. This time from David. Wanting to end the nuisance, I answered, intending to express my annoyance. But David immediately demanded that I continue to allow him to use the patents at the previous rate. The part Alex and I developed during his summer break happened to be effective for a product my former company was developing. If I had developed the part while at the company, the patent rights would belong to them, but this part was something Alex and I had developed personally. Its economic value was estimated at around $10 billion. However, out of gratitude to President Thompson, I had set the usage fees quite low. Alex had agreed to this, but now that I had left the company, we had returned to the original price. Didn't Sarah say the company would be in trouble without me? It was David who wouldn't listen, right? I have been in charge of the Patent Affairs Department within the General Administration Division, which handled various administrative tasks, including patent applications and licensing. I was promoted to manager because I had obtained patents. It was baffling that David, overseeing the General Administration Division, didn't understand patent matters. Sarah, who had worked under me, was of course aware of the patent usage fees. She had tried to persuade David to revoke my dismissal. Unaware of such details, David had no right to complain about the fee increase. After all, it's Alex's company that grants the patent usage permissions, and there's nothing I can do if he's asked about it. The management of the patents for the parts developed by Alex and me is entirely entrusted to Alex's company. Without President Alex's permission, providing the patents at the previous rates is impossible. Even if they ask me to let them use it cheaply as an individual, there's nothing I can do. David, learning this for the first time, demanded that the person in charge visit him. demanding that a representative from the company granting the permission come to the company requesting to use it is beyond impolite. Disgusted, I told him never to contact me again and hung up, immediately setting my phone to reject his calls. A few hours later, I received a call from my father. Assuming it was Michael crying to him, I decided to answer. As expected, he wanted me to reconsider the patent fees for Michael's sake. The condition was that I had to be working there. You'll have to figure it out on your own, I retorted, echoing the words my father had said when my mother fell. My father began to complain about my disrespectful tone, likely not realizing he was repeating his own words. When mother fell, those were the words you said to me, remember. At a loss for words, my father stumbled over his response. And then he made an unbelievable suggestion. That's right, it must be lonely living alone, right? Why not come live here with your new mother? He offered. What are you talking about? I've been living with mother all this time. My mother, who fell ill during my high school years, has since fully recovered and is back to work. A few years ago, she even started her own housekeeping company, actively hiring single mothers, which has been featured in magazines. It seems both my father and Michael thought our mother had passed away. You thought I was all alone, yet you offered me no help when I was in high school. When I said that, my father hung up without a word. I thought he should have at least offered an apology before hanging up, but since I had no intention of forgiving him, it saved me the wasted time. Besides, the misunderstanding by my father and Michael might have been partly my fault. Dropping out of high school required a parent's permission, and I had asked my father to sign for it. Without asking any questions, he signed immediately and sent it back. I did this because I didn't want to worry my mother, who was battling her illness at the time, but my father might have thought he had to sign because my mother had passed away. His immediate signing without inquiry probably meant he didn't care much about my presence. This allowed me to stabilize my life, but it left me feeling unsettled. When I mentioned this to my mother, "It's your fault for not consulting me," she said. Until Michael joined a company as my junior, my mother didn't know I had dropped out of high school. Even after dropping out, I continued to pretend to go to high school. She believed I was being supported financially by my father and felt guilty towards him. However, when Michael joined a company and started mocking me for being a junior high school graduate along with David, I became irritated, forgot my lie, and complained to my mother, which led to her discovering the truth. After scolding me for acting recklessly and making decisions on my own, my mother apologized to me repeatedly. But it's not like she wanted to become sick. My father, who knew I was struggling but chose not to help, was the most to blame. As we talked, my mother also became irritated, and we ended up complaining about my father together. In a way, dropping out of high school was beneficial since it led to obtaining patents, so it wasn't all bad. Although I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss my high school days, I don't regret my decision. Later on, after hearing the story from Sarah, President Thompson fired David and gave Michael a 6-month pay cut. It seems President Thompson never had a high opinion of David to begin with. He regretted hiring David, who had been pushed onto him by his wife's sister, with the condition that he could be fired if he caused any trouble. Michael, still young, was given a chance for re-education in hopes he might change his ways with just a pay cut. I knew about this because Sarah told me. After I left the company, Sarah kept inviting me out to eat. Thinking she was trying to appease me over the patent rights, I continuously refused. Eventually, feeling guilty for refusing so many times, I clearly told her, "I don't have the right to decide the price of the patents, so I can only keep refusing your invitations." Sarah was surprised, not realizing I had thought that way about her invitations. She had no such intentions and simply didn't want to become distant from me. She truly just wanted to have a meal with me. Since the patent issue wasn't involved, going out to eat wasn't a problem. Sarah and I started going out for meals frequently, and she eventually confessed her feelings to me. Surprised, as I hadn't expected her feelings to be romantic, I accepted her confession, having harbored some feelings for her myself. Now, I'm more smitten with Sarah than she is with me. Although President Thompson asked me to return, I declined, saying I enjoyed my current job. I didn't dislike metalworking, but I found the work in part development more enjoyable. President Thompson accepted this, saying it was fortunate I found a job I enjoyed. We've since established a good relationship, even forming joint research and development project teams between our companies. As for my mother, she filed for damages against my father and his new wife. My father claimed it was too late due to the statute of limitations, but my mother had only recently learned of the affair. She had suspected his infidelity due to his cold behavior during their marriage but had no proof. However, it was only last month that Michael's message turned my suspicions into certainty. My mother is determined to thoroughly punish my father for not offering a helping hand when I was struggling. The court ruled in her favor, and my father and his new wife were ordered to pay her damages. They blamed Michael for leaking the information and kicked him out of the house. After being demoted and kicked out, Michael seems to be living a difficult life. It's unclear if that was the reason, but I heard that he was fired for getting involved with a married woman who was giving him money. If I, a high school student at the time, could support my mother and myself, then Michael, a college graduate and adult, should be able to manage with some effort. Perhaps a bit of hardship would serve as good medicine for Michael, who had come to look down on others. Furthermore, it seems the lawsuit for damages has led to divorce issues between my father and his new wife. The new wife blamed my father for bringing Michael into the family, and my father blamed the new wife for insisting on it, leading to an unresolved situation. Additionally, my father was seemingly forced to resign from his company. Not because the affair was discovered. Because my father's company was also using the patent technology Alex and I developed, and Alex decided not to renew the usage rights. Knowing how hard I struggled during high school, Alex was even angrier with my father than I was. Alex's anger might also stem from being raised by his grandparents. Alex lived with his single mother until middle school but was sent to live with his grandparents when he entered high school, because his mother's new husband refused to take him in. Since then, his mother left everything to the grandparents and lost contact, not even providing child support. Fortunately, Alex's grandparents were reasonably well off, allowing him to graduate from college, but he felt guilty for the trouble he caused them. Hoping to repay them by making money through development, Alex proposed we undertake a significant project. When I heard this, I understood why he had been so eager to do something big, yet had no specific plan in mind. Alex despises those who fail to fulfill their parental responsibilities. He gets irritated even hearing news stories about children being victimized, so it's no wonder he's even more upset about someone close to him. We developed it with the hope that it would be used for the good of others, and I don't want it used by someone who won't even help his own son. Alex declared, refusing to renew the contract as long as my father was involved with the company. This led to my father being pushed to resign. Initially, my father refused to resign over a past affair, but the cold treatment from those around him became unbearable, and he left. People had perceived my father as a loving husband and doting father. But once they learned the reason for the non-renewal of the patent rights, they felt deceived by him. It seems my father had been introducing his new wife while still married to my mother. Everyone was surprised to suddenly learn he had a son entering elementary school, but assumed the boy had simply never come up in conversation. Discovering that the woman he introduced as his wife was actually his affair partner, and despite seeming to adore his son, He hadn't helped me. His eldest must have felt like a betrayal. My father lashed out, saying, "You're the ones who assumed everything was ideal." While I can understand my father's feelings to some extent, adultery is generally unacceptable, and providing for one's children is a basic responsibility. Facing cold stares was a consequence of his own actions. After resigning, my father once stormed into Alex's company. He's complaining that it was unfair to terminate the contract over personal issues. Indeed, personal feelings were involved. But legally, there was no issue since the rights were still acknowledged, just not renewed. Alex refuted my father's arguments, and he left dejectedly. Later, President Miller of the company my father worked for came to plead for the continuation of the patent rights contract. "We'll accept the renewal if you're willing to pay a higher price." The original contract was made when the technology was new and its demand uncertain, so the usage fee was quite low. President Miller reluctantly agreed, likely because they desperately needed the patented technology. After President Miller left, Alex joked, "Is this what they call poetic justice? Promoting good and reducing evil?" Alex, striving to repay his grandparents, became the president of a successful company with an annual revenue of over $5 million and continues to live happily with them. My mother, who fought her illness while living honorably, started her own company and achieved success. Though we faced hardships, enduring adversities has led us to fulfilling lives doing what we love. Yet, my father, who selfishly abandoned my mother and me, ended up unemployed and burdened with alimony payments. His new wife, also facing alimony payments, is entangled in a messy divorce with her now jobless husband. Michael, perhaps influenced by being taken by my father, suffered due to his arrogance and condescending attitude towards others. Both David and Michael lost their jobs. In the end, those who demean others seem unable to find happiness. Perhaps this really is a case of poetic justice, as Alex said,